Welcome to
Only Murders in the Building,
the official podcast.
Join me, Michael Cyril Creighton, as we go behind the scenes with some of the amazing actors, writers, and crew from season 5.
The audience should never stop suspecting anything.
How can you not be funny crawling around on a coffin?
No, that's true.
Catch Only Murders in the Building official podcast, now streaming wherever you get your podcasts. And watch Only Murders in the Building, streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
Once upon a mundane morning, Barb's day got busy without warning. A realtor in need of an open house sign. No, 50 of them, and designed before 9.
My head hurts.
Any mighty tools to help with his plight? Aha! Barb made her move. She opened Canva and got in the groove.
Bulk creating Canva sheets. Create 50 signs fit for suburban streets.
Done in a click, all complete.
Sweet!
Now, imagine what your dreams can become when you put imagination to work at canva.com.
Welcome to our weekly scouting report. We're a few weeks to halfway through the season at the high school level. D3 football is in week 3, and the FBS is in week 4. The NFL now in week 2. So depending what level you're at, where you're at around the country, we're at different spots. But by now, tendencies are starting to show, and so are the adjustments. And each week on the show, I bring you insights from coaches across the game, offense, defense, and special teams, that can help you sharpen your game plan and find that winning edge. This week on offense, Noah Riley of the Baltimore Ravens talks about what he calls elegant simplicity. The idea is to keep your teaching simple while creating multiplicity through personnel formations and tempo. Coach Riley stresses the importance of asking, how do they align? Is the front set to the field, the back, or the tight end? Once you know that, you can create the matchups you want. And probably the most important part, you don't win games just by drawing out the other team on the chalkboard. You win by taking opponents out of what they do best and forcing them to adjust to you. Here's our clip from Coach Noah Riley, Baltimore Ravens analyst at Lauren's First and Goal Clinic.
Now, the next thing, kind of talking about elegant simplicity, as Hard likes to call it, is being multiple enough, right? Keeping a moving target. So maybe there are some tendencies here and there where a team can pin you down, but there's enough volume in terms of formation, personnel, all that kind of stuff to where you can't really get a beat on or you can't really check into what you need to do. And also being able to change up personnel, formation, all that kind of stuff allows you the ability to formation matchups and regulate defenses out of what they do best. And kind of the thing I like to think about this with is, if you think about a slot machine, right, there's 7 numbers, right? But there's a 1 in 343 chance that you're going to get 777s, right? Because there's 7 numbers, right? But the chances of 7, 1 in 7 times 1 in 7 times 1 in 7 is 343, right? So that all multiplies, or it's exponential. So if you dissociate your operation, your personnel, your formation, your motion, your concept, and you get all those things dissociated, you have a lot of multiplicity with what you can do without teaching a whole lot. And then being able to draw parallels between your schemes, right? With Greg Roman on our gap schemes, we were able to run, a bunch of different variations of gap schemes. But at the end of the day, there's a wrapper, there's a trapper, and that double team on the front side, it was the exact same technique every play. And they didn't care what the defense was in. They're just looking at, are we leaving one for a single polar gap scheme, or are we leaving 2 linebackers for a 2-polar gap scheme, right? Being able to draw those parallels and give those guys variety without really putting too much on the players. And I think what comes with that, if you're kind of thinking that way, is you got to teach in spots. I think back to, when I was with the receivers, and a lot of guys, rookies, would come in and try to learn things all right, I'm the X has this, the X has that. It's like, no, you can't learn that way. You have to learn the full concept and be able to plug into whatever thing, because we might be running choice where you're the X out of this formation, you got the go route, but the next week, right, it's based on who's number one, who's number two. The next day you might be running it out of, you might be the choice runner, you might be the backside runner, whatever it is, and being able to teach like that. So getting into the game plan, right? That's all what gives you the ability to do this. But how are you dictating matchups is the number one thing you're trying to figure out formationally. And number one question I ask is, all right, how are they aligned? Front end, back end, piece by piece, how do they align is the number one thing I look for game planning. And is it a field boundary team? Are they running to, is the front set to run strength? Is it set to the back? Is it set to the tight end? How is the front set? And then the back end, right? Are they left, right? Field boundary? Is the nickel traveling versus passing strength? And then from there, you can kind of start to see, all right, like, what are the matchups that we want to expose? Do they have a soft edge defender? When we played against the Steelers, they made it a real point to set up their YY sets every time at the softest edge defender, whether at the shift motion, whatever they had to do to get to it, they were running at your softest edge. Getting a DB in the fit, right? Whether that be formation in the boundary, getting the nickel in the fit, forcing the corner to crack replace. If there's a corner that you think is soft, force him to fit the run, play in and play out. And then we're going to talk a lot about, we're going to get to the choice concept and just talk about how different teams around the league were formationing stiff linebackers on their best receiver. And then the next thing, kind of game planning wise, is what is their number one thing what do they build their defense around? And how do you regulate them out of that? And, the first thing that comes to mind is if they have an exotic edge pressure or blitz package, right? How are you does tempo take them out of their blitzes? Do they still blitz you against tempo? If you get into 4 open formations, are they still going to bring the nickel from all the way out there? Or do they swap the blitz inside? And then a big one I think that's pretty common is a lot of times you get into big people and they match, right? They're not going to have a lot of those same calls that they have out of nickel when they're in base. So what is it that makes them get out of what they're best at? And I think there's been games. I don't think we've ever won a game because we just pencil whipped a team on chalk. But I do think there are games where there was teams that did things that scared the shit out of us, and we made the game about what we did and took them out of what they wanted to do. Like we played, I think back to Seattle, where we played they were a really good fire zone team. We played the majority of the game in spread out formations, tempo, all that kind of stuff. Made those big, stiff linebackers, right? And Jamal Adams and all these big linebackers play out in space and take them away from all these, scary mismatches with the blitzes. And we took them out of what they do best and made the game about us. Right? Is there a game record? Consistently chipping him. The very next game we played against Cleveland, downhill linebackers. We played the whole game with fast motion, right? What are they doing to take away your best players? Going back to CeeDee Lamb, right? Moving your best player around so they can't push coverage towards him. And then uncovering disguises, right? What is the formation that makes them the most predictable? What gives you that man zone indicator? Is it the running back at number 1? Is it a slot formation, right? Are you uncovering what they're doing with cadence or tempo? Do they still disguise? Does that get them out of a lot of their disguises?
On defense, Baylor DC Matt Powledge reminds us that the red zone is its own game. One of the biggest factors right now is the quarterback run. Offenses don't want to expose their QBs all the time, but down in the red zone, those design runs often show up. He also emphasizes the need to identify what new concepts appear inside the 20, whether it's speed option, direct runs, or unique pass looks. Coach Powledge uses a checklist every week so nothing slips through the cracks, because in the red area, it's the little details that often decide the outcome. This short clip is from the Texas High School Coaches Association coaching school with Matt Powledge, Baylor's defensive coordinator.
All right, well, we want to start off with, okay, in our league right now, in the last couple of years, quarterback run game has been really prevalent in the red area, okay? So we want to find out, all right, if it's something that they do, okay, where does that start at, okay? Where does that exactly start, okay? Because a lot of offenses don't want to be running that guy a bunch, okay, so they're particular about when, right? What new runs show up down there, okay? Maybe they're more direct runs, all right? Maybe there are some gap scheme runs, okay? Which ones are they? Are there any new runs, okay? All right, so I know this past year there was a team that we scouted and we played, right? Speed option showed up, okay, in the red area. All right, where does the offense change, okay? We talked about that just a second ago, whether that's new runs, QB run game, or maybe even passing concept-wise, right? And then when do new concepts show up? All right, what yard line should our coverages change, okay? And that's all based on what yard line is the offense changing, okay? These are things that probably seem very simple and probably don't have to say anything about them, all right? But I think sometimes we get so caught up in the hustle and bustle that we overlook them. And so I think it's really important and it's good to have a checklist, all right?
Finally, on the special team side, Andy Merfeld lays out a detailed workflow for kickoff return prep. He begins with a complete breakdown, hash, alignment, depth, direction, and coverage notes, so tendencies are easy to sort and study. From there, he scripts the entire practice week early, usually by Monday or Tuesday, to make sure both the first and second units get the reps they need. His advice is clear: set the plan early, stay consistent with your depth chart, and give players time outside of practice to study and prepare. Here's the clip from Coach Merfeld.
All right, so now that we've discussed all the specifics of our returns, including the different types of blocks that we use, our base power return, and all of our change-up returns, I want to talk a little bit more about game preparation and how we prepare for specific games. And then we'll look at some situational planning and then a couple more things just on the mechanics of the back end and fielding the kick. So as we get ready for a game, one of the first things, obviously, that you need to do is put in your breakdown data. And so the different fields that we look at here are what hash they're kicking off from. That'd be left, middle, right. I guess you could do left, middle, or right, middle also if they kick off the hash a little bit, but not quite in the middle of the field. Also, kickoff team alignment, just meaning like 5x5, 6x4, 4x6. Usually I'll put it like field to boundary, or I guess left to right as we look at it if they're in the middle of the field. But as long as you're consistent there and it sort of makes sense, anything you use there is fine. If they use some stack alignments or some cluster alignments, then you would need some special designations for that, or maybe an extra column to designate that. And then after the kick, you go kick yards, so the depth of the kick location, left, middle, or right. Again, you just want this to match up, the hash to match up with this. So say if they're kicking this way, this is the left hash as we see it, the right hash as we see it. I still do it, or the way that Huddle Assist will label it, as an example, would be from the kick team's perspective, which is fine. So this would be the right hash. As the kick team sees it, this would be the left hash. And then so you just want this to match up with the kick direction. So if they kick it from this hash over here, this would be, right hash, and kicking to the deep right, okay? And then, we would be doing like probably power left return as an example, okay? So again, you just want those to be consistent. Kick type, meaning if it's a pop-up or squib, just something extra to note there. If it's a normal deep kick, you probably wouldn't have to put anything specific there. And then the result, meaning return, fair catch, touchback, out of bounds, things like that. And then just further notes here, just coverage notes. If there's differences in their alignments, different types of coverage, so different twists or stunts that they're using, things like that, different guys that are folding. Also the return yard, so you can sort and watch teams that have had big returns against them, those types of things. And also if you can determine what the return team was doing, the return direction I think is important. So if you want to see, like again, say they're kicking off this hash and they're going deep, and you want to see which teams have tried to take the ball across the field against them, and you want to be able to sort easily by that, that's something else you can do. So that's kind of our breakdown day that we look at. And then from there, we're looking at our scheme and our calls, what calls we want that week. I'll return to that in a little bit later on in this chapter. Depth chart, just setting our depth chart, our 2 deep at each position, just taking into account any injuries, from the previous week or in practice or whatever, with our frontline blocks, if there's anything that needs to change, or fullbacks, anything that needs to change, returners, those types of things. But we try to stay pretty consistent there with the same guys in the same spots doing the same things as much as possible. For us, it's, putting together the film and the install playlist so we can get that to the kids and share that as early in the week as possible. Get the scout cards drawn for the scout team. Get the schemes, our schemes, any changes that are printed and posted in the locker room then. So again, guys can get extra time outside of practice and meetings to be studying if they need to. Get any practice and drill work planned. So I think for the most part, on a unit like this, you could script the whole week of practice, right on Monday or Tuesday as soon as you come up with the scheme. So we'll just have a list, and we're hopefully hoping to get maybe 7 or 8 reps in a span of 7.5 minutes. That would be total reps between the first and the second teams. And so just trying to make sure that all the both units, the first and the second unit, get to see all the different looks that they need to see, or the primary ones, and that they're running the the calls that they need to run. And then planning out meetings, install meeting. I'll talk about our meeting plan just in a second here. And then situational planning in terms of like end of game, hands team type things. When are we going to hands team? What's our end of game plan? If we're down, if we're losing, those types of things. And then finalizing call sheet. Sometimes, just like with offense or defense, sometimes during the course of the week, you find out that maybe one return doesn't look very good, so you would take it off the final call sheet, or make some slight adjustments there. The work week here, Sunday we would review and grade the previous day's game, and then kind of start work on the next week's plan. Monday, continue working on the plan. Tuesday, we'd finalize the depth chart and the plan. We would practice, but we wouldn't work on kickoff return. Wednesday, present the plan to the staff, and then just make any adjustments as needed to. And then in the afternoon, when we would practice kickoff return. Thursday, reviewing the previous day's practice, and then in our meeting, review the previous day's practice. In the meeting here, special teams meeting before practice, we would also install to the players and then practice it. Thursday, again, review this stuff from practice, go over any notes that we need to, and then practice it again in a shorter period on Thursday. Friday's more of a jog through, so again, we can still review Thursday's practice a little bit in our meeting. It's a jog through, and then for the coaches, starting breakdown for the next week's opponent. And then Saturday, obviously, is game day. So we'll have a very short special teams meeting with just some final reminders and a little bit of film just based on what we're expecting from the opponent, and maybe a couple good practice reps from the week that the guys had. Again, this is for a college or a Saturday game. Obviously, if you have a Friday game, everything would just be moved up a day, which would be fine.
So that's this week's Scouting Report, 3 perspectives to help you sharpen your process and prepare your team. Remember, by this point in the season, the game is less about what's on tape and more about how quickly you can adjust. Those coaches who stay organized and detailed are the ones who find the edge every week. To get the edge, be sure to check out Modern Football Technology. We have modules on the offensive side and defensive side of the ball that give you in-game real-time analytics so you can understand what's efficient for you, what's explosive, and what the opponent is doing against you. Be sure to check the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and as always, find the winning edge.